I'm Kaz Page, and this is our story. Beyond the Belt is a documentary that we created because we wanted people to understand what it's like to be a Defence Force family when your loved ones are deploying to frontline war zones. We also wanted to shed light on what happens when it all goes horribly wrong. My husband is a veteran who sustained a brain traumatic injury through an accident that happened in service. Beyond the accident is a myriad of mental health related hurdles that we have stumbled, fallen, and pushed through for many years. We know that mental health affects all walks of life. This documentary is for everyone. Anyone that's out there suffering from mental health, and as importantly, those standing behind and beside and in front of the sufferers as well. Our hope is that by telling you our story, showing you how we chose to heal, maybe there's something in there for you too. The journey will never be over, but the hurdles are a little less. So come with us from battlefields to black belt and beyond, as we show you how we healed.
I wouldn't say I came from a functional family. I would say my family was probably more dysfunctional, but it also wasn't the worst upbringing that I know of. And I know for a fact that my mum had a way worse upbringing than me. Trauma plays a big part in who we are as adults, and that generation didn't have the opportunity to go through their trauma and get help in relation to their trauma. And so everything that probably happened to my mum as a child transferred into her adulthood as a very distant, very cold person. We've learned a lot since then. I think we do better at understanding trauma and the impacts of it now, but we certainly didn't, or that generation didn't have the opportunities that we have today.
Because my mother was adopted, there was also issues there, like mum didn't necessarily get the nurturing she needed in those senses. So when we came to our household, there was none of that sort of real, motherly nurturing that you can sort of see or people would resonate with.
Early adulthood for me was just a whirlwind of running and trying to escape and not really understanding what I was running from, what I was running to. Meeting Matt kind of started to help me understand that a little bit better because he had no expectations of me. He had no need from me. There was nothing from me that he could take that was value to him other than our friendship.
A lot of it was, needing to learn how to be part of a different type of family. There was a lot of time spent individually, both in physical isolation, but also in emotional isolation in my past. And so when that becomes your default setting, having people around constantly becomes a real sort of struggle. Go forward a few more years and then, you're joining the ADF and you start to get, introduced to concepts of loyalty, concepts of, support and how we should be viewing the people that we're responsible for and to.
You have this unique ability to own your steps as you go through, whether they're good or bad. That ownership of stuff, I think that when you came back from Kapuka and you'd started the journey in the army, I think that changed a lot about you, that ability to go, oh, I fucked it up, I'll fix it.
Yeah. If nothing else, it was that sense of individual responsibility was huge, and that's something that they sort of, trade in as currency, your individual responsibility, your ability to have integrity and be able to take responsibility for things that, could quite easily be explained away to be somebody else's responsibility is unique in the world.
The hurdles don't stop.
No.
In relationships in life, everyone's going to struggle, you're gonna be angry with your partner at some point in time. You're gonna be frustrated and feel not heard and not seen.
Yeah.
I think we've both been through that.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you take ego out, it seems a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah.
And 25 years later, to all the naysayers,
The Australian Defence Force, when they're advertising and all the marketing that comes out, it's a very big shiny toy. It's come play with us, it's great adventures, it's great career paths. All of that is true. I was supportive in the fact that it's what he wanted. I didn't have any clue what that meant for myself, and I certainly wasn't sure what that meant for my two daughters. So he had two stepdaughters. He was definitely looking at it from the perspective of a family unit and what it would mean for all of us. But it was the career path that he was dead fast on he wanted to undertake. He needed to hear from me that it was okay to go ahead. He needed to hear from me that no matter what it entailed, we would be okay. That was a catalyst. Are we going to be okay through this career path? And giving him my word that no matter what, we would stay together, we would be okay, we will figure it out. That was the green light for him.
I don't think Kaz has ever not been supportive. I think she's been supportive all along the way. What I feel like is that sometimes in there, you know, the emotion or the sense of like, what the fuck's going on here, sort of comes into play and has an effect. But yeah, I would say Kaz has always been supportive. At the time, we were living in a small regional town, and it was difficult to maintain employment. And that was taking a huge toll on me personally. Like, you know, not being able to provide for my family was quite a big thing, or not being able to consistently provide for my family. It gave me a lot of issues to do as far as my identity as a man, because the traditional role is that, you know, if you're the man, you're a provider, you're the protector, all those things. This constant need to be testing, to be pushing, to be growing, to be strengthening in these areas is, you know, for me, the way my brain's wired as an achievement junkie, you know, I kind of needed that in my life. For me, having the benefit of living in this country, having the benefit of being able to raise my children in this country where I don't have to worry nearly as much about their safety and things like that, it's only natural to think about, well, what's the best way to contribute back and what's the most way I can contribute back. We were raised on stories of my great-grandparents and who all served, and you know, they did big things, they did hard things, they did things that got them recognized. And so, you know, you hear the stories and being historical, you know, you hear all the good stories, you don't hear the bad stories. So you just, as a young person, think that's pretty cool. I want to do what they did too. I want to be cool too. And this is where we find ourselves. The lifestyle made sense. The world made sense to me when I was in Defence Force. It was essentially, you know, a piece that I'd been missing as to, you know, what I was hoping to achieve or the person I wanted to become. And so, yeah, I'd say it definitely ignited a fire in me. Like any institution, it's very, very, very separate to what conventional civilian life would look like. You know, everything is very, very controlled, very structured, and it's all done for a reason because we've been training soldiers for a pretty long time now. So, you know, the basics of what it takes to turn a person from a civilian into, you know, a recruit level soldier, into a trade qualified soldier, and into a, you know, line qualified soldier is probably fundamentally no different to how it was 4,000 years ago in the ancient world.
He was gone a week and I got a phone call from him saying he didn't think he could do it. I think everything about it, he'd never been away from us. He was with his mum and dad and then with us. He'd never been on his own as such. He'd never been away from family. And down in Kapuka, everything changed. There was, you know, I'm a very structured person. I'm very goal-oriented. I'm very process-driven. I'm very time management sort of person. Matt never was any of that.
And when he got to Kapuka, it required him to be all of that. And I don't say it lightly when I say they break you down and they rebuild you. They have to. They need to know that the people that are going to make it through that training are people that can follow orders, that can, be on time every time, do the same thing over and over and over again without question, and that 30 of them will all do it exactly the same way. So there is that process where they will change you as a human. You either adapt to it, embrace it, and do it really well, or you don't make it through. And I think the first week was a bit of a culture shock for him. So he rang me, and on the phone, all I could hear was, this voice of, I just can't do this. I've got it wrong. I've made a mistake. I very much at that point should have said, yes, you did, come on home, do something else. But I didn't. And I didn't because I knew no matter how many demons were swirling around in his head at that moment, I knew the army was something he really wanted. And to tell him to come home would be regret later for him. So I did what I thought was right. I told him to suck it up. He's fine. He knows what he's doing. He's got this. He is actually strong enough. Stop self-doubting himself and get back in there and do it right. Every single person that comes out of Kapuka is different. That's the point, because they need people to follow orders. They need people to do the same thing, the same way, every time, all 30 of you, and don't question it. That's the man that came home.
There's a bigger overarching sort of theme to it, and that is that, there's this loftier sentiment that is, we are doing this because we care so much about this country, because we care so much about the people here, and we truly, honestly believe that we are the gatekeepers for that lifestyle, or that life, or that way of doing things. And that we will stand in the way of anybody who's trying to disrupt that in any way, shape, or form. That's what soldiering is. Soldiering is, you feel so passionately about this one thing that you're willing to give everything up to and including your life to ensure that it maintains this level of quality for everybody.
My career was solid. My career, my work was very important to me. It's a part of who I am as a human. And so that was the one condition that could never be in jeopardy. And so we just had to find ways to make it work. His career was no less important than mine. I wanted my children to understand a work ethic and a career versus a job. I wanted them to see that if you work hard enough, anything's possible. And that was who I was. That was, in my DNA. When Matt joined the Defence Force, he had the same work ethic. He had the same passion and the same drive, and he wanted it just as much as I wanted it. And so, I mentioned before, any opportunity he got, he'd take, and he got a lot of opportunities. So it meant that sometimes I could be in, Thailand, and he could be in Melbourne. Well, we had 2 kids, and we had to make that work, and their routine couldn't be disrupted because we were chasing careers. There was a lot of wives and girlfriends of the defence unit that we were attached to, and they were amazing. But I also had civilian friends as well, and if we needed to, sometimes people would just come and stay at the home for us for a week. If Matt was away doing his training exercises and I had to go overseas for whatever. It's amazing what you can make work when you want it bad enough. Sometimes, things would go not to plan, and you've got to pivot. You've got to learn to adapt. You've got to learn to what is the plan B, and is plan B going to work? And if plan B is not going to work, and did we always get it right? Oh, fuck no. Many times we get it wrong. Many times, our kids would be upset because something hasn't gone the way they needed it or wanted it to go. They would miss out on birthday parties because I was asking already of my friends to step up and do something for me. I couldn't then push even further. There's only so much you can rely on people to help you through this.
I do remember things like post-baby, that I would just turn up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and say, go and have a shower. I'll look after the baby, go and have a shower. Little things like that made a huge difference to actually being able to, for Kaz, to be able to function. Yeah.
There was times where I thought, do we get a look in here at all? All of a sudden now we all have to bleed green. And I didn't sign up for it, he did. I signed up to support him. And this is what support looks like.
I knew academically that it was going to affect the family, but I guess I didn't have the understanding the same way I would these days. What a young man doesn't take into consideration so much is the fallout effect on everybody else. Now, essentially for those 8 months, it's no different to losing a family member. They are literally just picked up and gone. Scenarios like that, as they play on longer and longer and longer, take a increasingly more severe effect on the people at home. They didn't sign up necessarily for the same job. They signed up to be my wife, kids, whatever, but they didn't necessarily sign up to be the supportive mechanism for a soldier who's then deployed. So I feel like there was probably a lot of resentment there. They did the best they could about not projecting it onto me, especially in those times. But it's difficult, it's going to have an effect, because anytime you remove part of a working family, there's going to be a knock-on effect with how it affects people psychologically, emotionally, everything.
And that's one of the greatest and sort of the hardest things with Kaz, is that once she sees how important something is to you, then that becomes her goal too. Now for Kaz, that's not always the best thing to be doing, because, then you get to the end of that and then you're like, well, what now? Because now I've spent all this time trying to help somebody else achieve their goals, and I don't know where I fit anymore, because that person's now left the country, they're on another continent, and they're looking at different things and they're doing different things, and their focus is completely over there. So that's another part that a lot of people don't talk about with defence life, with military, with the individuals within and the family surrounding them, is that, there is an aspect there of the first and best care that you can do for somebody in need is, or for when you're in need, is self-care. How are you actually there to manage your ability to be able to navigate this tough time? At the end, there's no energy left, there's nothing left. And when they've given everything they've got, and you're still 4 months into a deployment, have another 4 on the back end to go, it's fucking tough for them. They're literally coasting along on zero fucking fuel, and they're still got to try and make it all work. So yeah, and I imagine it's almost like its own type of torture, that last half especially, because you're just nothing but faced with the what ifs and everything else that's going on. So Kaz would do the best she could to try and support me in those moments, but she was fighting her own battles and realistically wasn't doing the best to support herself at the time, not through negative means and not through a criticism to her, but just simply because of who she is.
Matt had 2 deployments while he was in service. The first one to Iraq, and then the second one to Afghanistan. And they were both completely different. In getting ready for the deployment to Iraq, I had no idea what was going on. It is a shortfall that I wrote about in the book, because the Defence Force should have done better at connecting families of those that had and those that are about to deploy, just to give us some sort of insight, to make the journey a little bit easier maybe. There's strong people in every avenue that you go to. And I think if the Defence Force had have done better at identifying strong families that have endured deployments previously and allowed them to kind of be a contact point for someone, maybe I could have reached out. Matt and I were also trying at that point to have a family of our own, and it wasn't working. And we'd been trying for a number of years, and we decided to embark down the pathway of IVF. Now, Matt's going to a frontline war zone, and there is a high risk. It's a risk, but it's a high risk that he might not come back. Not having his child before he goes was horrible. It was It hurt. It was the thing that I promised him at the start of our relationship. And I hadn't been able to deliver it. But when you're living in the thick of it and all you want to do is deliver on a promise, it puts a lot of pressure on you. And so I made the mistake of saying that I would go through IVF on my own while he was deployed. I don't advise that to anybody ever.
I was friends with Kaz during her IVF journey and also through the birth of Willow. Going through IVF on your own, particularly for Kaz, because she already had 2 daughters who were going through school, and Matt was deployed over in Iraq. So friends were going down to Sydney with her while she was going through that process, and I was one of them. So yeah, I was privileged to be there and help her through that during one of the egg being fertilised, I guess. We had a nice time, but it's an immensely personal journey and one you want to take with your partner. And I don't think friends, however well-meaning, are a substitute for that emotional support. I think the other added pressure is that Kaz had her other 2 girls naturally, and that the kind of IVF journey was an odd thing to have to go through as well.
You have to go through this process of extracting your eggs, and to get your eggs ready for extraction, you need to pump yourself full of hormones. And the highs and lows that come with that, I underestimated the requirements of IVF, the emotional impact of IVF, the hormonal side of IVF, and everything that comes with that. And I also didn't know what it was like to be a wife with a husband who was going to war. When you add all of that stress together, it's probably more than any person should have to endure. And I know that I did most of it to myself. I just, again, didn't know what I didn't know. So we went through. He went to Iraq and I went to IVF, and I had the extraction, I had the implant, and none were viable. And that is probably one of the darkest days of my life. Getting the phone call from the nurse letting me know that there's no baby. That was hard, and there was nowhere to turn. If you haven't been through it, you don't know. Afghanistan was a little bit different because he deployed, and 2 months later I gave birth to our first child, Willow. And that was huge for me. That was probably more than I ever anticipated. I had already been through a deployment. I knew what to expect from a communication point of view. I knew what to expect from a risk point of view. I knew what to expect from all the what ifs that I was going to go through, because I'm still me, right? Like, I haven't miraculously overnight just gone steadfast different. I knew all of that. What I didn't take into consideration was the fear. And fear is crippling. Fear of this precious thing that we had worked so hard. We had lost so much. Every IVF failed. And we had been trying for years before. I had had a couple of miscarriages. So there was this whole impact of what we had gone through to create this little human. And all of a sudden she's here and she's growing, and he's going off to war.
Happily, Willow was conceived naturally and born again while Matt was deployed, this time to Afghanistan. And of course, during that time, Kaz was really struggling with his absence and really wanting to have more contact with him, and we were talking about that, and I could really see she was struggling emotionally. So I took it upon myself to try and write a gentle email to prompt him to make contact. I don't necessarily think he found it that way, but it was well-intentioned, and I was sitting at the other end with Kaz, knowing that she really needed that contact. But yeah, I think it put immense strain on her, because it's not just that, you're also dealing with someone who's deployed in a danger zone. And if you're not getting a lot of contact, you're not sure what's happening with them physically in terms of their safety, or emotionally in terms of what kind of trauma they're experiencing. So there's a lot of layers of very, very high levels of stress being put on somebody. So yeah, it was very high.
The army side of things and the families that I was close to while Matt was serving, there is a connection there that you can't describe. There is a connection there that you can't put words to. They understand. You know, I say sometimes the hours between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. are the worst, because the silence is deafening. It's where all the demons are allowed to talk. What if he doesn't make it home? What if he gets blown up? What if he doesn't, you know? They get that. They get it. My civilian friends don't understand that. They don't understand why he would want to put the uniform on. Why do you want to sacrifice your family for all of this? And that's what it is. You know, anybody that's putting the uniform on is sacrificing themselves and their immediate family, and they're writing a blank check for their country. I was down in Sydney at my parents' place, and I had Willow with me as a, just over 1-year-old, and I was pregnant with Scarlett. Now, Matt had been in for quite a few years, so I knew that when he was going away on a training exercise, he was away. That's all there is to it. Like, I'm leaving on this day, I'm coming home on this day, and there's no comms in between. Okay. So, standing in the kitchen of my parents' place, and my phone rings, and seeing it's from Matt, something's not right. And instantly I go into what's wrong mode. So I answer the phone, hey babe, what's going on? And Matt responds immediately with, please don't panic with what I'm about to say next. Of course I'm gonna panic. That's the dumbest thing you can say to someone. So I take a deep breath and say, okay, shoot. He said, there was an accident, I'm in hospital, but I'm gonna be okay. I know my husband. I know what I'm gonna be okay means. I actually have no friggin' idea what's going on. The fact that I'm still in hospital means that potentially there's more to this that I'm gonna tell you, but I'm not gonna tell you anything. Matt plays everything down. Matt can be in 100% pain and tell you he's in 10%. Matt will think that the world is gonna blow up and he'll tell you we're going on a holiday to Hawaii. He doesn't let anything out. He never has. Everything stays in and controlled, and he just manages the process. But he's my husband, right? I know this man. I've been with him for a while. So I just say to him, okay, what happened? What comes next is strange, because he's talking and he's telling me what happened out on the field. And I can't tell you exactly why it didn't feel right. I can't tell you that there was words missing, or that he was slurring speech, or he was tripping over himself. And I can't tell you it wasn't all of the above. All I can say is that the next sort of 5-10 minutes in that phone call, it didn't feel right. And I didn't get a lot out of him. I got told that they were out on a nighttime exercise, the Bushmaster was in an accident, he copped the brunt of it, There was some fluid discharge. He's in hospital. They're doing some x-rays. I said, are you in pain? He said, yep, but we're controlling it.
So the accident was, I want to say November 2010. Departed down to Puckapunyal in Victoria, and we were down there for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks doing various tasks. On the night that the accident occurred, we were doing a nighttime move, essentially conducting our cross-country movements in our PMVs, our protected mobility vehicles. And at night time, because of the environment, because of the lack of light, and because you're in a tactical scenario, you don't run the vehicles with lights on. So we're driving all by night vision equipment, and that's generally how we'd get past. On the night in question, my driver had, unbeknownst to me, not correctly fitted his equipment or not set his equipment up correctly in the evening prior to us departing. So we continue on the task, we're going to do it, and we're driving through. He's sort of struggling to keep in the right position for where he needs to be, and there's a few little issues, but it's still not quite setting up with me. And you know, as such, on this particular night there, we'd managed to make it across to the job that we were doing for that particular part of the exercise, and it was on our return. So because time was an issue, we had to get guys bedded down because we were up again first thing the next morning to train more. The movement was done as more of a hasty movement as such. In the time there, you know, my role as troop sergeant means that I'm at the end of the line. I'm the last man there because I need to make sure and account for every car in the packet and every man in the car. Unfortunately, at the time, while I was doing what my job is, which is making sure everything's sweet, checking the general scenario, checking the outline, making sure that the car's good for the next halt, it became very clear then suddenly that the driver was incapable of, you know, keeping up with the rest of the column. What is not obvious all the time on the Puckapunyal range is that there is a lot of what appear to be, you know, just grassland areas, but they're intercut with seasonal creeks and little river crossings and things like that. And sure enough, when the grass is growing long, which is summertime, which is that time of the year, they're nearly indistinguishable from anywhere else on the, you know, flat ground. So, you know, increasing speed of the nighttime move, and the driver, who, you know, he might have seen the difference in the way the grass was moving if his night vision equipment was set up correctly, but there's no guarantee he would have either. So we've got to be perfectly clear and perfectly honest about that one. There is an opportunity there that, you know, just it was out of everybody's hands. But in the path to trying to catch back up with the rest of the body, driver put the vehicle into a unseen creek bed, approximately at 45, 50 k's an hour, and I got pretty much picked up and slammed into a robotic weapon station that's on top of the vehicle. Smashed up my helmet. I got sort of hung up in the hatch at the top, and I don't know how long. If I was out at all, I don't know how long. The first thing I remember afterwards was hearing my driver's voice in my earpiece asking me what's going on. And then once I had a few minutes just to sort of try and get some equilibrium back, I just sort of, you know, sat in the front seat next to my driver as opposed to up out of the hatch. And I just sort of was giving him rough guidance as to where he needed to be so we could get to where we needed to be for the night. When I went to disembark my vehicle at the rear, left the rear hatch, and during the day I'd actually damaged the rear tail step, so that had been removed from my vehicle. I went to step down, and I knew it was of larger height, so it wasn't an issue, but when I did, whatever it was, whether it was my equilibrium or what, but my legs just did not catch me, and I pretty much fell, sputtered in, and then when I was trying to get up, I was pretty much just sort of bulldozering my face across the dirt while I was trying to get my legs back under me. And it was at that time that, you know, the training staff, the guys who were sort of observing everything to make sure that we were achieving what we need to achieve for the officers, they took a look at it and go, that's not supposed to be that way. That's not right. So we need to start looking into this a bit more. And that's where they sort of started the quote unquote care.
Things just weren't adding up right. I could tell he was frustrated because whatever the process was happening in the hospital at the time wasn't working fast enough for Matt. And he wasn't getting the answers that he needed. He felt like nobody was listening. He had fluid discharging that we later found out was brain fluid, and pain, insurmountable pain. Anyway, Matt being Matt, the exercise that they were on was continuing. He felt like he was letting the team down. So a couple of days after hospital, Matt discharged himself and sent himself back outfield. Do I think that should have happened? No. From the very first day he came home, you could tell he wasn't right. You could tell he was in pain. Even our closest inner circle friends were commenting like something just seems off. And there was nothing striking. You couldn't see. He didn't have a bandage. He didn't have a plaster. He wasn't in a wheelchair. There was nothing you could see. It was the way he spoke. Sometimes his words would be slurred for no reason. Matt doesn't drink. It's not like he'd been on the terps in the background or anything. Matt's always been the even keel. I'm the fiery one. I'm the one that comes out swinging. Matt has always been the even keel, and that was gone. There was nothing even keel about him. He was either silent or exploding. There was almost a sense of fear, and I've never felt that from him ever. So from day one, I knew something wasn't right. And the harder I pushed, the worse it got for him. And he would put the uniform on. And this is a man that, for everything leading up to this point, everything about him, he loved the green machine. I wrote in the book that I honestly think if I ever made him choose prior to the accident, I would never have made him choose prior to the accident for fear of not being his first choice. That's how much he loved putting on that uniform. Now he's putting on the uniform to go to work, and there's just, I don't know, I can't say it's anger, it's sadness, it's not right. And he would come home from work, from the barracks, off, just silent and not wanting to talk and just in his own shell. And, I'm the fixer, right? I want to fix, I want to know, talk to me, what's going on. But if I would push particular ways, if he would have a seizure, so I know their seizures now. I used to just, where did you go? You blacked out, what's going on? If I would raise that, then he would get more angry because he didn't know they were happening. They weren't real to him. So it's like, why are you making this shit up? I'm not. I don't know when it's going to happen, so I can't catch you. So there was so many wars going on now between him and I. I'm trying to buffer the kids. I'm trying to, when he's in that real filthy, horrible mood, I'm trying to say, can you maybe just take yourself somewhere else? Because you're being a real ass right now. And that makes things worse, right? How do you gently say you're being an asshole? I haven't figured it out yet. So I'm pregnant. I'm fighting with this man who I'm starting to not know who he is. One of my kids has left the home. I'm broken over that. I'm broken over what I'm losing. This is all being felt by my child. My other child's there not knowing what the hell's going on, who idolizes her father, who's slipping away from us. And you fast forward to January and I have this baby. And this baby should have been another amazing, monumental moment in our lives. And it was just shrouded in darkness. How does she not feel all of that?
There's the big one that hangs around the Defence Force is PTSD. That was sort of sold to us all as being this all-consuming thing that would definitely wreck your career. So you're very, very defensive in regards to anything to do with that. And by proxy, that's a psychological issue. And as we understand things to do with brain injuries now, is that a heavy part of it is the brain chemistry, which leads down to psychological path. So yeah, there was definitely an aspect there that I didn't want to entertain that aspect of it. because what it meant for me being capable, able to do my job, everything like that. I wanted to be, I wanted to understand it as much as possible, but at the same time too, I needed to bury as much as I could because I didn't want it to affect my career. Now, flash forward a few months and even a year or two afterwards, the long and the short of it was the people that were responsible to help me manage my way through this were negligent and reluctant to do anything of the sort. And so that ultimately led to me not having a career in Defence Force because of those issues that were, whether it be from my first end treatment, was incorrect, to, assessing it and maintaining it as opposed to trying to get me off the books of being on sick leave and back into the work. And even down as far as, liability goes, they were very reluctant to say, do anything, that could cause them to have to be personally responsible for anything. And so that played a massive part on the whole, I guess, acceptance training, how to figure out, how it should be.
There was this one day, and he was holding Scarlett as a newborn baby, and we're just having a chat. And all of a sudden, he just disappears from our conversation. He's just holding the baby, but there's just nothing there. And it's like, when they say you're watching a train wreck in slow motion, so all this unravels in front of me and there's nothing I can do to stop it. And he comes back and he just looks at what he's holding and there's just pure fear in him. And he just looks at me and just starts yelling, take it, take it, take it now before I throw it, take it. And I just race over and I grab the baby and he's just like, fuck, and he just walks away. She's screaming. I'm trying to calm her. I have no idea what just happened. I don't know where he's gone. He comes back in a couple of minutes later and he's just like, oh babe, what's wrong? Just, what's wrong? Why is she so upset? Do you want me to hold her? Like, fuck, I want you to touch the child. He's like, whoa, what do you mean? So I calmed Scarlett down. I got her off to sleep and I sat him down. And I just said, you're breaking our family. You're destroying us day by day because you won't get help. Because you won't ask for help. And I told him what had just happened. So begins the journey of our 7-year fight. He had no choice but to believe me at that point. He had no choice but to seek help at that point. And we either had to do it ourselves without the Defence Force's support, or we had to fight them to get it. And it was one hell of a fight.
I was so busy spinning my wheels in this process through all this pain that I had no emotional, psychological capacity to be able to empathize with anybody. On this end of town where things have settled a lot more, things are consistent a lot better, we've had a lot more time and space to be able to work through these things, develop new skills. I'm very aware now of what effect it had back then. And still probably not to the same degree that I would be if I'd been as, I guess, capable back in the time. But I have a better understanding these days of what the whole effect was.
So I wrote a ministerial. And in my ministerial, I sent it to
politician of defence, chief of defence, and a couple of other significant people. Do you know that within 4 hours of submitting that email, bells and whistles were fucking opening. People were ringing me, you know, we've got this in hand. It'll be fine. We were issued a support person. At the time, it was his rank was warrant officer, Pete Goon. He changed the landscape for us moving forward. Why did it take a ministerial? Why did I have to get angry enough and scare my husband? Hey, Matt didn't want me to write the ministerial. Oh my God, it was the last thing he wanted me to do. They don't believe me now. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to put me in an asylum. They're going to, you know, they don't believe any of this is real. Who makes a person feel so belittled because it's an injury they couldn't touch? They couldn't put a plaster on it. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He didn't come home in a box from overseas deployments. What, the brain's not a real thing to injure? We get it so fucking wrong in this country. He sustained a brain traumatic injury in that moment. He didn't sustain depression on that day. He didn't sustain anxiety on that day. Those things came from the treatment he got post that brain traumatic injury.
And Kaz is on the phone with a brigadier general. So my mentality or my feelings on the moment were like, I knew it was incredibly important and needed to be done. You know, this was the only pathway left for us. And not because we'd chosen this pathway as being a credible option, but because there was physically no other options left for me.
From a family perspective, the damage doesn't just affect the sufferer. And this is something that, again, I don't know that we're doing enough around the mental health journey of Australians. Because after the accident, he comes home. The people that see the full gamut of who he is becoming are the ones that live in the house with him. Me, his children, his stepchildren. I'm still working full-time, and everything about his career and his earnings and everything are depleting by the second. Everything about him mentally is depleting by the second. And I'm scrambling to try and keep up with everything. So when we go into the new year, I've had Scarlett, I have to go back to work. I have to be putting money into our world so that we can eat, right? Because, you know, roof over your head, pay your bills and put food on the table. They're the three fundamentals. Everybody's treading on eggshells. Nobody's knowing if he's going to come out of the bedroom, what kind of a mood he's going to be in. And so the minute you hear the door start to open, everybody kind of hold your breath, because you don't know if he's coming out swinging verbally or if he's coming out and he's, hey guys, how you all going? You never knew. The blackouts that he was having, that now we know they were seizures, but you know, he could go for 30 or 40 seconds and, are you back? You know, one of the guys down at the coffee shop, Matt had a seizure one day. So we bought a coffee shop, and we bought the coffee shop because I was working and I had to travel. When I had to travel overseas for my work, my mother-in-law had to drop everything and come and stay in the house because I couldn't. It sounds horrible, but I couldn't trust the safety of my children to Matt. So I needed somebody else to move into our home and be me. We bought a coffee shop because we had some really close friends of ours in the town we were living in that worked in hospitality. And I knew that that gave Matt somewhere to go, to feel like he's a part of something, to have a purpose. You know, it was amazing. He would treat that coffee machine like a gun drill. Dismount the gun, rebuild the gun. And that's how he treated it. He was still green on the inside. He still wanted to be a soldier. It was never going to happen. That was draining us. that was going to kill us financially. But it was worth it because it was giving him a place to go, a place to hide, a place to be something other than in pain and aggressive and angry, and it gave him a refocus sometimes. I was never scared. I was never scared for me. It never entered into my mind. And you're right, he's a trained killer. So I don't know if he might have wigged out one day and just lost his shit so bad that I was at the brunt of it. But I never let that thought enter into my head. That wasn't an option. I put mechanisms in place to make sure that our children were never alone with him. So yeah, subconsciously on some level, I knew there was a risk. And my children were never alone with their father. I was scared for other people. I went down to the coffee shop one day and Matt asked to go for a walk. And we took off across, we were walking up the footpath. And you gotta understand, Matt's trying everything he can to stop the pain, to shut shit down. So he's going into the gym every day and he's smashing these weights so hard, and he wants to be, when I look back now, I get it. What I didn't realize at the time is his addiction at this point was now steroids. Some people take alcohol, some people take drugs, Matt's steroids, because he's in the gym every day and that's how he's reacting to the pain. And he wants it harder and he wants it more and he wants to, I don't know, drop a weight on his neck, who knows? And so he's getting bigger and bigger physically. And we're walking up the street this day. I don't know what triggered it, but he's holding my hand, we're having a chat, and all of a sudden I thought he was going to break my hand, and he is heading for the other side of the road, and there's this complete stranger walking down, and he's in there. He's going to kill this guy, and he's ripping verbally, you fucking, a whole lot of things that I probably shouldn't say. And he's going, I'm going to kill you. And old mate's just frozen. He's just, and I'm screaming at this guy, just run, just please fucking run, just please run. And I'm pushing at Matt's chest, right? It's, Matt, come back, Matt. And I'm trying to scream at Matt, come back to me, look at me, please, can you just look at me? And I'm screaming at him, can you just run? And he's running, right? And then all of a sudden, everything just stops. The man's run off, he's scared as shit. Matt just stops and he just looks at me and he's like, what are you doing? I thought, what are you doing? I've got tears, right? I'm hyperventilating. He's like, what's wrong? What? And I went, honey, nothing. Can we just walk? The day he rang me, we wrote about it in the book. And I got his permission. And it wasn't the only time, but it was the first time. And it was not long before Christmas and things were spiraling. It was just, everything about it was getting worse. It was the start of the lowest point. And I was at home with the kids. He was supposed to be at work and it came up on my phone that he was calling. So I answered it and I'm just like, hey babe. And there's just silence. There's nothing on the end of the phone. And I'm like, Matt, answer me. I need you to answer me. What's wrong? Are you okay? Is there an accident? Please, can you talk to me? What's going on? And I knew that I had the little kids behind me listening. So I'm like, I can't react. I can't. He's just like, can you please say something? And then I just stopped and waited. And there was just this noise, just this, almost like a whimper. And then I just heard in a whisper, I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore.
The bit that a lot of guys don't talk about that I'll talk about now, because this is probably fairly relevant, is that when you've lived for a long enough period of time where you've assigned the fact that you could, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to you, unbeknownst to any common sense or anything like that, you could simply just walk out of a tent and die. That changes your scope of reference in regards to life preservation, self-preservation, and the way you think about death. It almost makes it like a credible option to you, you know? In those moments, in these times, for me, that's a very real opportunity or an option there. It's something that can be a solution to your problems, or the solution to the problems you perceive from others. So naturally, you know, when the moments get very hard, very difficult, or we've been, you know, me and Kaz were fighting too much, I would either isolate myself significantly from the family, whether it be, even if I was in the house, I would be emotionally separate, or I would physically take myself away so that I could try and, you know, reframe things, or at least just burn out some energy. Now, one of these particular moments, you know, I was really just done. I was done, you know, I couldn't get the help I needed. Financially, you know, we were struggling. I was losing a business because my insurance wouldn't cover me anymore. So everything was kind of going wrong. Take into account where I sit in how my mentality is towards the role of a father, or the role of a husband, and things like that. You know, you actually wind up doing kind of the opposite of what you hold to be the highest ideal of what the example of that should be. So therefore, if I can't get that right, and I can't get all the other things right, and everyone's having a go at me, and I feel like shit, well, then I can be the solution to that problem pretty easy. What you don't think in those moments is that, you know, I wasn't thinking about what that long-term effect is for Kaz, what that long-term effect is for my children, what that long-term effect is for my family, my parents, anybody. I just knew that I needed, I really, really knew deep in my heart that I couldn't be the problem anymore. I just couldn't do that anymore. The whole idea of servitude was to stop people from having to be hurt unnecessarily. And that's exactly what I was doing. So therefore, my solution is remove me. Now, I think everybody would, you know, say that, you know, killing yourself is not the answer to, you know, removing yourself from your family because you're causing them pain is not necessarily going to cause them any less pain.
And so I screamed, and I snapped, and I screamed down that phone, if you kill yourself, I will make your children hate you for the rest of their lives. I will tell them that they weren't enough for you, and that you took a way out that was easier than staying and fighting for them. I will tell them that you didn't choose them. Now, when I tell people what I did, some are mortified. How could you put that on him? How could I not? I wasn't enough for him to choose to stay. He wasn't enough for him to choose to stay. The pain, the demons, the black dog, they were all winning. Maybe his kids were enough for him to choose to stay, and I was right, because he came home. And I was right again and again. And I don't know if that's the clinical response that we should take with people this broken or at that point. Do you know? Here's what I honestly believe. And I'm grateful that the day never came. But if the day came to where the noise was so great that he couldn't make the phone call, that's the day he was going to kill himself. I wouldn't have got the phone call. We don't get the phone call on that day.
So in those moments, I'm going to continue to remind him that there is a bigger picture, that he is more to us than where he is today. I'm gonna force him to want to do it for his children if he can't do it for him today. Okay, I'm not clinically trained. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but no other fucker's come out to me with a better idea since. So every time we hit that point, that's what I'm gonna do. I'll fight to keep him when he can't fight to keep himself.
On one particular incident there, we wound up having a conversation over the phone and just, I think Kaz realised where I was at. I would like to say I realised where Kaz was at, but I probably didn't, to be honest. And, she used every dirty trick in the book she could to change my mindset. And when I say every dirty trick in the book, when we talk about things in military terms and stuff like that, there's all the textbook stuff, there's all that side of things that's written down, this is how you war fight and things like that. What it comes down to is, how far are you willing to go to get the job done? How hard are you going to fight? For most guys, and this is a fair generalization, but they'll go, okay, well, I've got a rifle, so therefore that's how I employ that. For the rare few, they're like, no, everything and anything is my tools, and everything and anything is my weapons, and anything will get the job done. And Kaz adopted that mentality with this situation. For me, she threw everything from resentment, raising my children to despise me, through to, love and care and nurturing, come home, we're just going to fix it, we'll talk it all out, everything's going to be fine in the end, the whole gamut. Because, and ultimately it sounds really weird to say it like that she was doing all these things because she loved me, but she was fighting for me to survive in those moments. And, you don't mind a hard fight, but if you have a fair fight, then you haven't done your homework. You haven't tipped the scales in your favor, and Kaz was doing everything she could in that moment to tip the scales in her favor because she needed it. And I needed it. I just didn't realize it.
Matt has adjustment disorder, anxiety, and depression. And he had to readjust. And when you go from being so regimented in the Defence Force and so, everything's process driven, and you've got to be passionate to be a soldier. You've got to want it. For that to be taken away and there just to be nothing, there's just nothing left, because there was nothing for him. He just had lost everything. So finding jiu-jitsu and being able to go somewhere 3 or 4 times a week, but he found a group of guys and girls that could take it, and not only take it but give back as well. And so he would come home from jiu-jitsu happy and light, if that makes sense. He always felt heavy after the accident. The screaming, the incessant screaming in his head would stop. I am Karen Page. I would prefer to be Kaz because there's way too many connotations to Karen. And my husband is Matt Page, who is getting his black belt today. It means the end of this chapter. So if you go back a step, Matt was a soldier and he gave everything into that. And so as a soldier, I used to joke and say he bled green, because when Matt is attracted to something, when Matt wants to achieve in something, then he is all in. There's no gaps. And so as a soldier, his career came to an end due to a traumatic brain injury in an accident. Finding jiu-jitsu replaced the army in a sense. So it gave him camaraderie, it gave him mateship. It allowed him to be a part of something that's bigger than himself, but also to include his family. And the pinnacle for him was set as black belt. That's the journey that he wanted to be on. And so all of our holidays were structured around where can we train as we travel.
I've watched him over the past however many years, coming into 10 years now. But I also know that it was a big part of his mental health. Like, it's his therapy room, it's what he needs to keep going. And I feel like that is a big part. I feel like I've seen that. I feel like I've seen when he's frustrated, and then when he comes to jiu-jitsu and it's all okay again. And I feel like when he's around the people he trains with and he is just genuinely rolling for himself, I feel like it calms everything for him. And I feel like that's what not only for him means a lot, but for the rest of us as a family, if that makes sense.
The days coming into it were kind of mixed because I'd had a few injuries in the last week and stuff like that, so that's kind of played with my readiness and ability to be able to train and keep my conditioning up and things like that. So, you know, that was a concern, but at the same time too, like, I just got to the point in the last few, I guess, days, weeks, that I was just done. I was just ready. I just need to get done. The thing that I guess I didn't worry about doing the thing until I was right there doing the thing. I've learned enough to know just to keep that shit separated out, because it's not helpful at that point to overbuild it. So that's where I sort of went to, and then it was jobs on, so we just started rolling and yeah, get into it. So in the last lead up, the brief period coming into it, I dislocated 3 of my fingers. I'm not sure how damaged my hand is, to be honest, because I didn't really want the information in my head to know that it was. It was Monday a week ago, I tore my pec off my ribs, and so that kind of sucked as well. And then I kept on getting like chest shots during the thing as well, and that was like making me go really try and guard that. And then I'd get lit up somewhere else, and I'd be like, fuck, I just couldn't catch momentum on that. So that was kind of frustrating. But yeah, so there was those injuries, and then just all the niggles and usual shit that you get when training. So yeah, that was kind of frustrating.
And I knew he wouldn't quit. I knew no matter what, he would go through and he would destroy his hand before he gave up on getting that black belt. And to hear him call out Willow, he had preempted her. He had talked her through what he needed her to do if it went wrong. And I didn't know. And so he called Willow, and Willow was just up. For a 14-year-old to be so solid in her approach, so resound in, I just need to get this done. There was no emotions, there was no, you know, I was bawling. The 2 other little kids were bawling. We were breaking for him. Willow is him. Willow was just, my dad needs me and I need to just get this shit done. So the entire, 20 minutes, and it was only 20 minutes, all of this happened in 20 minutes. But there was every emotion you could have. I was proud, I was scared, I was happy, I was shattered. And at the end of it, I was just so proud of the man standing there with his black belt. When the transition between defence and civilian life, I think personally is traumatic enough. And I don't think there's enough done around supporting that transition. I think they're left to their own devices. I think they're left to their own, find your own path, find your own community, find your own way. And that's really hard from somebody who's been told for their entire career when to get up, what to wear, where to be, how to be there, what to do, and their only response is, yes, sir. All of a sudden now it's, oh, you're on your own, buddy. So the jiu-jitsu community doesn't tell you when to get up and all the rest of it, but they will rally around you. They will push you. They will give you significant things that you've lost.
you know, there's a lot of people talk about jiu-jitsu, and it's been kind of fashionable now for a while. Look, there's a few things when you're talking about jiu-jitsu, and it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. For me, it was jiu-jitsu. For other guys, it's extreme marathons, or for other guys, it's, you know, they surf at a very high level and things like that. For me, it was jiu-jitsu. But I think for people anyway, but definitely for men, you know, you need to have resistance in your life, I think. Otherwise, I guess men are kind of directionless unless we have something to sort of push against, you know, and this is the motherfucker of all things to push against, you know. It's on a short trip, you know, guys are getting through in 7 if they're exceptional. For most of us, it's you know, 10, 12 years of dedicated study. And so it gives you a long-term goal, it gives you a focus, it gives you something that, you know, gives you resistance, but it also gives you a lot of endorphins. You know, you're constantly doing things that I guess blokes need, but we don't get a lot of, which is kind of, you know, we don't have a lot of contact with people these days, so we get contact with people. We have trust in there as well, because, you know, you have to be able to trust your partners that they're not going to fuck your shit up. You have them trust you that you're not going to do the same, you know. So it kind of gives you this nice little conduit to getting back into real sort of personage, I guess, if you want to say it like that. Like, you know, it brings back some of those skills that we sort of deny ourselves when we're in defence. And if nothing else, you know, for my daughters, it's given me an opportunity to give them a skill set that's going to serve them for their whole lives. You know, and I want them to have every fighting chance. You know, I think with everything going on at the moment, the way it is with spousal abuses and things like that, like, for me, it's really important that the girls have a lot of options. And being able to give them a gift like that they're gonna be able to use for the rest of their life is pretty special. And so for me, you know, that's been a huge part of my rehab, is just knowing that I'm able to set them up for as much success as they can. Yeah, it's huge.
Gracie Bar. So Gracie Bar. Right. So this is a gift that I got from Matt, but it's sort of fun. This came from Kenya. It's a Maasai spear. And that's the throwing end. That's the like double tap and killing end. And when I ordered it, I wrote to them and it said you could have it engraved. And I said, I'd like you to write Professor Matthew Page 5, 9, 24. And what they wrote on it was Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 to 24. They wrote the Bible verse on there instead of what they were supposed to write. So there is a new handle coming with the proper inscription on it. But this one's sort of cool because the Bible verse says that if you're going to the temple to make an offering and there's something that's not right between you and one of your brothers, that you should first leave the offering, go make it right with your brother, and then come back and offer it. So I sort of fuck with the Bible verse and I'm going with that. If another handle never shows up, I don't know about FedEx or DHL from Kenya, but this is all nice. It's sharp too, like if you pop careful, I almost cut myself popping that off. And running around playing with it in my house was fucking mad. But yeah, there you go. You have a spear with a Bible verse on it.
When we look at things like mental health and how it's treated in Australia and things like that, you know, I think you're completely correct in the sense that it is definitely looked upon negatively. Me personally, you know, I'm very candid about them, my struggles with this area. I still struggle with it on a regular basis. You know, it's a constant thing where I have to keep maintaining it. And that's kind of where I'm at now mentally with, any of it. with the concept of mental health. You know, I rebadged it in my brain to view it as being mental fitness, because mental health is like a placid, like not a placid state, but a passive state. Mental fitness means that you're actively pursuing a goal to strengthen yourself in these areas. And for me now, that's how I view these things. So, you know, historically, there was a lot of shame carrying with a lot of these issues and things like that, because you know, especially in the defense world as well, you know, I carried a certain level of respect from people. I carried a certain level of, you know, that guy never breaks, that guy doesn't stop, he just keeps going, he can take it all on, he can do the thing. So you become embarrassed very much. There's a lot of shame there to say, like, I'm just not handling this. You know, so in my mind, it was really important to try and work out a way to be good with it, because it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't changing unless I worked to actively change it.
Something that I know Matt has said, and that some of the other guys that I've met who are also like Defence Force or maybe not working in those roles anymore, is that they did miss the camaraderie, and then also the like just having a single goal and focus. There seems to be something about that that's like nice for the mind, like you know exactly what you're here to do, and that's what we're doing. And then you've got people around you that you're doing that single task with. And I think from what they have shared with me, that jiu-jitsu sort of fills in a way that spot, that feeling in them where they, it gives them a single focus, it gives them camaraderie, you know, something challenging that we're all working on together. We're just trying to achieve that thing. And then, you know, sometimes you know, these big preparations, then you have tournaments and stuff, and all of it, I guess it's like the training and then the actual thing happens, and then training some more and the thing. And I guess like the routine of it seems to be nice for guys who are maybe missing that aspect of what they had when they were in Defence Force or armed services or first responders and stuff.
We're still flawed. We still fall down like every other couple. But we can now differentiate between a couple's hurdle versus Matt spiraling.
For me to say that you're going to use any one system of doing things or anything that's going to help is going to work every time, it's not. What I can say for certain is that if you're willing to try every day, you're probably going to get somewhere further along. That's the first step. If you're willing to get up every day and try, no matter about whether you make it out of bed even that day, doesn't matter if you get halfway through your day and you give up, if you get 3/4 of the day and you're beaten down, you don't even make it through the first hour and you're done. That's okay, that's all okay. Because you're getting up tomorrow and you're doing it again.
I actually more so struggle with a lot of the stuff that surrounds that he is somehow, you know, broken, like the name of the thing, or that there's something wrong, or he needs help to get this. Like, no, he doesn't. Like, Matt's the man. Like, he's this incredible person. He's like one of the smartest dudes I know. He's one of the most capable dudes I know. Like, he can build anything, like think and help you process through absolutely anything. He is incredible father, incredible husband. He's just like, he's the dude, you know? So I've never looked at him as anything different, like because of his Defence Force thing, or if that makes him any different or anything. Like, I don't, like, obviously now I'm thinking about it because we're sitting here talking about it, but no, he's just this incredible guy. So it's sort of the fact that he is who he is with all the shit that he's been through. It makes me think of him even in higher esteem, because like that's even more impressive that he's become the person who he is. But no, I don't think of him like any different in any way.
In general, it became really clear that all the women that I was dealing with in the shop were all gathering not to learn something. They were, even if they were coming on the pretense that yes, they were coming to learn something because there was a class on, they were coming because they were forming friendships with other women. And so that shop just became this magnet for different groups of people to meet and to talk and to be in another woman's company for 3-4 hours. They would come every week.
So I didn't realise it, but I've suffered with massive anxiety all my life. And I went through many, unfortunately, decades of that sort of a cycle of being highly anxious, thinking I can perfect myself and then I won't be anxious anymore. So I tried to achieve my way out of my anxiety. When I get my degree, I won't feel anxious. When I get my honours, I won't feel anxious. When I get my PhD, I won't feel anxious. I got a PhD and I probably got imposter syndrome. So the hardest job I've ever had in my life is being myself. And so when I discovered acting, it was actually the only time in my life I've gone, I love this and I'm good at it. And I've never said that to myself about pretty much anything else in my life. So that's pretty full on. The anxiety then was mixed with depression, but my depression was usually to do with I didn't do something because my anxiety held me back. And then I would get down on myself for not doing this thing that I wanted to do. I was interested in performing from a very young age, but I just couldn't. The idea of auditioning terrified me. The idea of being rejected terrified me. And so it took a very long time for me to be able to do that. And, I actually don't think, even if I had realised it in my 20s, that that's what I would like to do. I don't think I could have taken the brutality of the arts industry anyway. I was just too fragile. So despite all the achievements or whatever, I got to 2022. I'd had a really crappy time at work with a new workload model where someone had stuffed up and made me work. I think it was an additional 100 hours because they'd miscalculated my workload and I could only do that over 3 discrete academic activities in a space of a month. And I was just shattered at the end of it. And I felt that the organisation I'd given my energy to for 23 years had really crapped on me from a great height. And I went off on leave, I came back, my stress levels sort of immediately jumped as soon as I sort of went re-engaged with it. And at the time, I was perimenopausal, which has its own set of wonderful things. And I just had a breakdown. And I just had this massive anxiety attack. And I just said to my partner, Martin, I said, I can't do it, I'm crap, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm useless. I can't. So he got me to the doctor the next day. And I just said, he said, what do you need? And I said, I just need to pull back. I need to deal with this anxiety. And so he put me on some medication. I took all of the leave I could take. I ended up with COVID and then long COVID. It's a good year. And by the end of the time where I was contemplating going back to work, every cell in my body just said, hell no.
In our journey through all of this, I decided to go and meet with some specialists as well, because as much as I denied it for so many years, you can't go through something like this and not be traumatized. I write in our book that Matt was the sufferer through all of this. Matt's loss was enormous. The impact to Matt was bigger than anything. But that doesn't mean that I didn't walk every day side by side with him. That doesn't mean that I didn't feel like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to be able to save him. I wasn't going to be able to protect him. I wasn't going to be able to bring our family through this. And was this it for me? Am I now the carer and never again the wife or the friend? You don't go through that kind of shit, shrug it off and go, yee-ha, here I am. Of course that causes trauma for me. At one point, because Scarly Girl is neurodivergent, we decided that we would go and find out what part of that is hereditary. And in meeting with the specialists and the psychiatrists and going through all the testing and understanding, yes, I'm autistic. Yes, I have ADHD. Yes, I have repetitious disorder or repetitive disorder. But what stopped me in my tracks was being diagnosed with PTSD.
If I had to surmise just one, I guess, driving force that was pushing me to pursue doing this film and getting it out there to the world would be to say, as simple as this, like, if this, underfed, under capacity, broken down, bad genetics human can manage to pull all these concepts and thoughts together, then anybody can. That we're not any one thing, that we are, I guess, so much more capable to affect ourselves and to carry on and to be a fulfilled part of society.
Reach out. Like when I was growing up, every conversation was superficial. No one talked about mental struggles. About the most you'd get is, "Oh, you're crazy." "Yeah, I'm crazy too." That was about the extent of it. Really superficial, and you'd be trying to hide the fact if you were struggling because you assumed everybody else was fine, because everyone was pretending to be fine. And of course, most people aren't. At some point in your life, you're going to go through stuff, and unless it's the really big stuff, like a death in the family or a divorce or something where people go, "Oh yes, they might need support." If you don't show people that you're struggling, then as we were talking about about Kaz, we didn't know, even though we thought we knew her. And at the time she probably needed us the most, she wasn't reaching out, and we didn't see that she needed us. So, and I think that it's when people are struggling on their own, and you can't. You've got to acknowledge the things that are going on, and you've got to extract it out of yourself. And sometimes you need a professional to help. Sometimes you need a friend to help you get to the point of getting the professional help. Maybe sometimes you just need a friend. But I think doing it on your own is nigh on impossible. And I think that's where, I think for men particularly, that can be a real issue, because women are better at reaching out to each other. And for guys who are going through trauma, and as with Matt being a vet, and we know the suicide rate in that area is just horrendous. It is creating those networks where someone can reach out in a psychologically safe environment and know that it's no judgment, and someone can emotionally or even physically wrap their arms around them and say, "Let's find a way through this."
So today, that's how I am. I still cry. I still get upset. There are moments where I still just want to hide and run and not have to deal with it again. But I will. And I'll get up every day and I'll come back fighting every day, because my husband and I are both worth it. And so will he. And we will do the work on the good days to make sure that we're catching each other on the bad. So that's how we are today.
I've been through a significant journey of time where I've had a lot of things taken away from me. A lot of my situations have changed, and I've had to try and work out a way to get through it in a harmonious fashion as possible. And so it's really important for me to live the example, and that is that if I'm going to be honest about it, if I'm going to send it out there and say, "Hey, this is what you should do," and be open and honest about all the things mental health, then this should be no different. I need to be out front and open and honest with this. I need to stand behind it and say I believe in it, and I need to get it out there to the people that I need to get the message out there to people that need it, that, hey, you may not be feeling it right now, but that with dedication, work and responsibility and time, if you stay true to the task, you'll find salvation, you'll find redemption, you'll find your way back. Nothing's ever done as long as you're working for it. Just keep on working.